Do your part to prevent mosquito breeding. Mosquitoes will breed in any container that holds water.
Tightly cover water storage containers such as drums, barrels, buckets and tanks. If this cannot be done, pour cooking oil on the water surface. Punch holes in all tins, plastics and beverage boxes to prevent the collection of water before disposal. Cover all tires or fill with dirt to prevent water collection. Scrub all vases once per week to remove mosquito eggs. Use mosquito repellents to protect yourself from mosquito bites. Dispose of garbage properly by placing in plastic bags and securing properly to prevent water collection.
A message from the Ministry of Health and Wellness.
Welcome to PBCJ's live coverage of the lower house. I'm Simone Absalom Gale. The session will start with prayers followed by a roll call of those in attendance. This is usually followed by questions and answers to questions, statements by ministers, items under public business and private members' motions. But before we begin, let's try a parliamentary trivia question. True or false? Any Commonwealth citizen 21 years or older who has been domiciled in Jamaica for the 12 months preceding an election may become a member of the House of Representatives if elected. Get the answer at the end of this introduction to the lower house. On this session's agenda, statements by ministers. Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, Marlene Malahoo Forte, and Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. Christopher Tufton, are down to speak. Under public business, the State of the Constituency debate continues with Norman Dunn, Member of Parliament and Minister of State in the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. It should be noted that the agenda can be adjusted, with items being added, removed, or replaced. If you are planning to attend a session, here are some things to keep in mind. No visitor shall create any act of disorder within the precincts of the House. No visitor shall be admitted to the House without first obtaining an admission card from the office of the clerk. Visitors who remain within the precincts of the House during a suspension of the session are asked to keep silent. It's almost time to go to the main event, but before that, let's get the answer to the trivia question. We asked, true or false? Any Commonwealth citizen 21 years or older who has been domiciled in Jamaica for the 12 months preceding an election may become a member of the House of Representatives if elected. It's true. Among those who may not become members of the legislature are members of the Defence Force, persons serving a foreign government, judges of the Supreme Court or Court of Appeal, and persons holding or acting in public offices. Let's discuss a few more interesting things about the Houses of Parliament. Member of Parliament for St. Andrew East Rural, Juliet Holness, is now the Speaker of the House. Juliet Holness was elected Speaker of the House of Representatives on September 26, 2023. She has been elevated from Deputy Speaker of the House and replaces Marissa Dalrymple-Philbert, who officially resigned on September 21. The new Deputy Speaker of the House is Member of Parliament for St. James Central, Heroy Clark. Let's talk about the role of the Speaker. The Speaker is the presiding officer of the House and is charged with numerous duties and responsibilities by law and by House rules. As the presiding officer of the House, the Speaker maintains order, manages its proceedings, and governs the administration of its business. Now over to the proceedings.
President. Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we thine unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations. And grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interest, prejudices, partial affections, the result of all our counsels be to the glory of thy blessed name, maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the king, the public weal, peace and tranquility of the island, and the uniting and knitting together with the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity, one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
You may be seated. This Honorable House now resumes its sitting, this being October 3rd, 2023. Call of the roll. Mr. Clark. Mr. Clark. Mr. Bartlett. Mr. Holness. Dr. Clark. Dr. Chang. Ms. Grange. Mrs. Williams. Mrs. Malahoo Forte. Dr. Tufton. Mr. Mackenzie. Mr. Chuck. Mr. Vaz. Mr. Charles. Mr. Green. Mr. Warmington. Mr. Morgan. Mr. Hutchinson. Mr. Terry Long. Ms. Smith. Dr. Dunn. Mrs. Cuthbert Flynn. Mr. Main. Mr. Davis. Mr. Witter. Mr. Brown. Dr. Brownberg. Dr. Charles. Mr. Chin. Mr. Cousins. Ms. Crawford. Present. Ms. Daly. Ms. Davis. Mr. Golding. Mr. Graham. Dr. Guy. Ms. Hamilton. Ms. Hannah. Mr. Enriquez. Mr. Henry. Mr. Hilton. Mr. Jackson. Mr. Lawrence. Ms. Lee. Mr. Miller. Mr. Montague.
Ms. Morrison, Mrs. Nita Garvey, Mr. Paulwell, Mr. Phillips, Dr. Phillips, Mr. Robertson, Mr. Robinson, Mr. Samuda, Mr. Shaw, Mr. Siblis, Mr. Slowly, Mrs. Vaz, Dr. Wheatley, Mr. Williams, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Wright, Mr. Lawrence, and Mr. Robinson, and Mr. Charles. Thank you, Madam.
It's indeed a great honor and pleasure to welcome you all to the commencement of the State of the Constituency debate. I would like to extend a special welcome to as a matter of fact, let me first extend a special welcome to our Senate President, Honorable Tom Tavares Finson, who is seated in here today. Yes. Thank you very much for being present. We are, in fact, expecting former Senator Professor Trevor Monroe. I'm not seeing him yet in the gallery. I would like to also welcome all our guests seated here, those joining us via the various social media platforms today. Today will be a very short day and a reminder that we are also here tomorrow. Yes, we will also be here tomorrow. Who else? I also take note, since Ja is an English word, I would like to welcome back to the Parliament our member, Mike Henry, otherwise called Jamaica, who is seated in the Parliament today. Welcome, it has been a while. House Leader. The mic system, okay.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's so nice to see you sitting in that chair. And just to say, I was not here last week. I want to congratulate you. And I must also express my appreciation of the work that the former Speaker did and to wish her well. So, Madam Speaker, I will ask at this time for the suspension of the items on the agenda from statements by ministers to public business, so we can go, as customary, directly to the constituency debates, and then I will ask for a recommittal of the agenda.
Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move, be it resolved, that this Honourable House of Representatives call upon the government to take into account proposals put forward by members of Parliament regarding constituency matters in reviewing the budget for the current financial year and forecasting the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2023-2024 financial year. Madam Speaker, I will ask for the recommittal of announcement through to reports from committee or through to notices of motion given orally.
Announcements.
Laid on the table of the House are the following. Minister paper numbers 87 to 91 of 2023 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated May 1, 8, 15, 22, and 29 of 2023. Minister paper numbers 92 and 93 entitled Cabinet Agenda Issues dated June 5 and 12 of 2023, and Minister papers number 93 and 94 dated June 19 and 26 of 2023. The annual report of the Jamaica Vacations Limited for the financial year 2016-2017. The annual report of the Bath Corporation or Bath Fountain Hotel for the financial year 2020-2021. Report of the State of the Jamaican Climate, Volume 3, Information for Resilience Building, dated June 2022. And finally, we have the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Kingston East and Port Royal. Thank you.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers, reports from committees, notices of motions given orally.
Madam Speaker, I beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move, be it resolved, that this Honourable House of Representatives call upon the government to take into account proposals put forward by members of Parliament regarding constituency matters in reviewing the budget for the current financial year and forecasting the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2023-2024. Madam Speaker, I now beg to give notice that at the next meeting of the House, I will move, be it resolved with reference to the resolution approved by this Honourable House on the 29th day of September 2023, appointing 1. Constituency Boundaries Committee, Ethics Committee, and Committee of Privileges, and by resolution approved by this Honourable House on the 27th day of October 2023, appointing a Standing Orders Committee, and by resolution approved by this Honourable House on the 20th day of June 2023, appointing a Joint Select Committee examining job descriptions, codes of conduct, and performance standards for parliamentarians, and that as a result of the resignation of former Speaker Honourable Marissa Dalrymple-Filbert, that we now appoint the new Speaker, Most Honourable Juliet Holness, to be substituted therefore. Madam Speaker, I further beg to give notice that at a later stage today, I will move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion.
We are still at notices of motions given orally. State of the constituency debate begins right here. And let me make special welcome of persons seated in the gallery, the people from Southeast St. Mary who are here to support their Member of Parliament. No clapping in the Parliament, no clapping. You are not allowed, those in the gallery, to clap, to make any noise, to bang the decks, to participate in any way, you are welcome to the Parliament to sit and listen attentively to your Member of Parliament, the Honourable Dr. Norman Dunn, Member of Parliament for St. Mary's South Eastern and Minister of State in the Ministry of Labour and Social Security.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It is indeed a privilege to stand in this honorable House today. To report on the great constituency of South East St. Mary, the place of my birth, and to report that we are in fact building stronger. Madam Speaker, all credit must be given to our Heavenly Father, who grant favor over us as we say thanks to him for his goodness and mercies, and hope that it will follow us all the days of our lives. I must acknowledge my incredible mother, who has worked all her life in the market to care for us, and is still alive at a grand age of 95. My siblings, my friends who have all stood by me and supported me on this incredible journey. Madam Speaker, I want to recognize the greatest leader that this nation has ever seen, the most honorable Andrew Michael Holness, who in 2015 accepted my application into the Jamaica Labour Party and my desire to contest the seat of my birth, South East St. Mary. I am appreciative and humbled by his continued confidence in assigning me to the position of the Minister of State in the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, and now the Minister of Labour and Social Security. I proudly work alongside my fellow ministers and parliamentary colleagues on this side of the House, the greatest party in the Western Hemisphere, the Jamaica Labour Party, but as well as my colleagues on this side of the Honourable House. Madam Speaker, there are several legends amongst us, but I know this House will permit me to single out a few who I believe has undoubtedly be recognized for their contribution to this great nation. Firstly, I must refer to the Honorable Edmund Bartlett, the World Minister of Tourism, and our current House Leader, our Deputy Prime Minister, Horace Chang, Desmond McKenzie, our Minister of Local Government, Minister Babs de Grange, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports, Mike Henry, who is here with us today, Honorable Audley Shaw, and Carl Samuda, amongst other stalwarts who over time will not permit me, but they have paved the way for all of us to be here today. To the good people of Southeast, you're so here, you're so here. You're so here. To the good people of Southeast St. Mary, my people, my family, my friends, who continues to have faith and confidence in my leadership, and who remains the driving force of my desire to improve the place I long call my home, Southeast St. Mary. I want to say thank you. It is impossible to mention the constituency of Southeast St. Mary without lauding the effort of the hard-working and dedicated councillors, Richard Query, Mayor and Councillor of the Richmond Division, Councillor Hugh Bryan of the Anata Bay Division, Councillor Ledvers Danvers, who is here today, of the Caston Division, and Councillor Caretaker Joseph Robinson, all of whom have remained steadfast and dedicated to the task of hand and for improving our beautiful constituency. I also want to recognize Councillor Freeman of the Belfield Division. Madam Speaker, my constituency management team has been the glue that has been helping to hold the constituency together and to serve the people.
Member Dunn, would you take your seat for a moment? This is the first in our series of constituency debates, and it was remiss of me not to remind you that you will not have the privilege of a lot of extra time. And as such, and as such, for all members of the House who will be participating in the constituency debate, please be mindful of your time, use your time wisely. And for those who engage in distracting and confusion, please desist, because you will also be having very limited time to present in the constituency debate. So persons will not be allowed to speak until they choose to conclude. Please use your time wisely. Member Dunn, I have taken note of the time I have taken from you.
That's right.
And we will ensure that you will be the first shining example for all the members of the House in the limited time that they will have for the debate. Please take your...
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And well said, we recognize the time limitations, so of course I will definitely abide by the time. But Madam Speaker, I must recognize my constituency team, management team, who has been the glue that has held us together. Nigel Phipps, Omar Love, Raquel Barkley, Richard Moore, Onique Bennett for their hard work and dedication. But Madam Speaker, I must express my thanks to the former Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, Minister Hill, Permanent Secretary Sansia Bennett Templar, CTD Parkins, Nadine Enriquez, my former secretary, and of course my new support staff, Anesika Aliman, Asia Brown, and the current staff of the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. But Madam Speaker, I am honored to work alongside the Honorable Pernell Charles Jr., who can be considered my family, although he doesn't have the signature look, but my family, as well as Permanent Secretary Colette Risden and the entire ministry team. Minister Charles and myself have taken on the ministry with such zest and conviction as we labor tirelessly to bring change to this ministry. Needs to function in this new age and to continue the great work of past ministers like Minister Carl Emperor Samuda, who continues to be a shoulder that we all lean on. Madam Speaker, I'd like to recognize my godfather to the east, Darrell Vaz, and my godfather to the west, Bobby Montague, and Dr. Guy, who has always said, I am his best member of Parliament. Madam Speaker, as a member of Parliament, I've heard the cries for improvements to the PATH program. Working in this ministry with Minister Charles, I look forward in transforming PATH through our ITP Innovation Transformation Project to become a more fit-for-purpose assistance program. The program, Madam Speaker, though designed to assist persons in need, is also tailored to put people on the path of full independence. Madam Speaker, when our athletes are on the track, the entire world stops to look. When our reggae girls are on the track, the entire world stopped to look. The entire world has now stopped to look, Madam Speaker, at this Andrew Holness-led government is revolutionizing this nation from poverty to prosperity. Madam Speaker, we have the lowest unemployment rate, the lowest debt to GDP, the highest international reserve, and the best credit ratings of all time. We are building stronger. Though the past year, 2021-22, has not been without its challenges following the crushing effect of COVID, we have all experienced the struggles in dealing with some of our pressing needs of the constituency, and as a government rightfully concentrated on building back better stronger, especially after the worst economic health and shock for the last 100 years. Madam Speaker, we have all seen and heard the cries of our constituents regarding water, Road, and a number of other areas that citizens consider to be of priority. Cries were heard in Long Road, Paisley, Baxter's Mountain, Fort George, Belfield Line, Belfield Pen, Belfield Works, Aleppo, Charlottenburg, Richmond, Castleton, Luna, Plattfield, and other areas, Madam Speaker. Sadly, these concerns aren't new. They have existed for a very long time, but I will not stop until these are properly addressed. Madam Speaker, I want to assure Jamaicans, particularly those in my constituency, that this government understands and cares. In these regards, the constituency of South East St. Mary will be placed on a track of building stronger. Madam Speaker, it was the great Mandela who said, education is the most powerful weapon which we can use to change the world. It is no secret that education was the vehicle that transported me out of poverty and allowed me to stand here today in this honorable house. Therefore, Madam Speaker, it is a prime focus for me now and in the future to ensure that youth in the community receives proper education. In regards, Madam Speaker, to CDF allocation, with the $5 million that was assigned to education, 59 tertiary students received assistance in their tuition fees. Another 27 students got vouchers to purchase tablets through your own device program, and 204 persons received book vouchers. Madam Speaker, we have also distributed over 2,000 bags, books, and supplies to students. In addition to our annual tertiary grant, Madam Speaker, we hosted an award ceremony where we issued awards and bursaries to our university students. Madam Speaker, this year we also focused on students through health and back-to-school fairs in highly populated area in Belfield, Fort George, and Richmond. However, with the challenges like transportation making it difficult for residents in distant communities to get to these general events, we thought it was necessary to accommodate these treats in a more intimate setting in the form of pop-up treats, where at these treats, Madam Speaker, every child over the age of 3 walk away with some books, bags, or stationery items. Madam Speaker, we know our students' future is bright with education, and I'm appealing to persons, citizens, and constituents to utilize the benefits provided by the government, particularly the PAD program, especially to our university students who can access up to $100,000 per year to assist with school fees, as well as a Heart Trust NTA, which offers associate degree for 2 years, free of cost. Madam Speaker, I applaud the Minister of Education, Favour Williams' strides towards launching a pilot project to install air-conditioned units in 30 schools to reduce the heat stress on students amid the rising temperature. I endorse this project wholeheartedly. But, Madam Speaker, I'd also like to remind this honorable House that since becoming Member of Parliament, I have embarked on my own pilot project to install air-conditioned units in every principal offices and in grade 6 classroom in South East St. Mary. I am happy to report, Madam Speaker, that up to 10 of the 21 principal offices have now been air-conditioned or will be air-conditioned shortly. Likewise, Madam Speaker, the Rock River Primary School, grade 5 and 6 classroom has now been air-conditioned, making it the first grade 5 and 6 classroom in all of St. Mary, and possible in the first in any public school across Jamaica to receive this benefit. Madam Speaker, big things are happening, as you can see, in education, and the constituency of South East St. Mary is on track to building stronger. Madam Speaker, on the matter of sport, which is near and dear to my heart, there's a saying that we all know, that all work and no play make Jack a dull boy or Jill a dull girl. And we believe, Madam Speaker, that a balance is necessary. Perhaps the most powerful journalist in America, George F. Wills, said, "Sport serves society by providing vivid example of excellence. Madam Speaker, Southeast St. Mary has been excelling in the sporting arena as we have gone above and beyond in hosting our sporting events. I strongly believe in harnessing the energy of our youth, and their sportsmanship must be applauded. My love for sports and the efforts that we have been putting into sporting activities, including upgrading sporting facilities and assisting with the unearthing of talents, is bearing fruit. Madam Speaker, did you know the captain of the first reggae girl team that went to the World Cup is from Southeast St. Mary? And the young footballer who scored the only goal in the recent under-17 match for Jamaica in Antigua is also from Southeast St. Mary. Therefore, Madam Speaker,
take your seat, member. House Leader. Member Dunn, would you be so kind as to turn your mic off? Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the member's time be extended by the period based on the understandings of the standing order, and indeed your own generosity with regards to the comment you made a little earlier with regards to the time that you took in explaining certain things to him. So I think 10 minutes, Madam Speaker, as per the requirement. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
So, members, I am going to move the motion, but considering the gesticulation of Member Dunn, I believe an additional explanation is warranted. So, members, the standing orders has stipulated for constituency debate a period of 15 minutes. The standing order recently was changed to facilitate 30, it's not there. It's not there. It's still 15 minutes. It's still 15 minutes. Right, it's still 15 minutes. So if you recall, we were having a discussion about moving the time for debate to 30 minutes, but it has not yet made its way into the updated standing orders. So we do not have 30 minutes. A circular came around some time ago while we were having the discussion. But may I have the new standing order? This is 2020. No, right.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that notwithstanding standing orders which define the period of...
It's 15 minutes still. It changed to 30 minutes. It's still 15. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that notwithstanding the standing orders which indicate that the member's time for speaking in constituency debate is 15 minutes, that this Honourable House allow the member, in this instance, because of circumstances which you mentioned earlier, to an additional 15 minutes to conclude his presentation. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
House Leader, I would ask that you move a motion to facilitate the time that he expected, 30 minutes in total. So, House? No, he's around there telling me 30 minutes plus 10. And it is going to be consistently applied to all members, okay? And so the time for speaking, the discussion was that we moved to 30 minutes, but it was not by rules in the standing order. It would have been based on the House Leader moving a motion, and we would vote on it accordingly, which is what the House Leader is executing. So, The question before the House is that the member's time be extended by 20 minutes to be extended by 20 minutes to facilitate his completion of his sectoral presentation, as I'm mindful of the time that was previously taken from him. Those in favor? Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to turn to the matter of water. Madam Speaker, one thing that farmers and the rest of the nation need to survive is water. Benjamin Franklin said, when the wells dry, we know the worth of water. Madam Speaker, access to water has been challenging, made increasingly difficult by climate change, especially the drought conditions that have been plaguing our island. I must first commend the effort of this government to cushion the blow from which we have been years of neglect in relation to water infrastructure and distribution. We have all seen Minister Samuda crisscrossing the island, identifying new sources, and Minister Mackenzie establishing water shops. During the period of drought, Madam Speaker, the once reliable water sources in my constituency have been providing little or no water. I've had meetings with the National Water Commission, looking at the rock spring in Richmond and its urgent need of repair so that water can be harvested and channeled to residents. The system, Madam Speaker, in Gibbs Hill has not generated enough water to produce precious commodity, and supplemented trucking had to be implemented. Similar cries have been echoed from residents right across the constituency. Madam Speaker, in most areas in Belfield and parts of Richmond is on what is called a regulated water system. So they only get water once per day on a weekly basis when it's their turn, and if they miss that turn, Madam Speaker, they get no water. This is very distressing. Madam Speaker, it is heartbreaking to hear my constituents call daily, Mr. Dunn, we don't have no water. Although the Water Commission is responsive, sometimes it's not immediate and the people suffer. Madam Speaker, I am, however, happy to report that the Chovy water system is progressing nicely, with most of the equipment, pumps, pipes already been procured, and it has been issued, a contract has been issued to a contractor. I am anxiously anticipating the system's completion, and I believe it will solve much of the water issue in the Richmond and the Belfield area. But, Madam Speaker, I want to turn to Castle Division, which does not have a system of potable water, except in certain parts along the Junction Road. This has been a repeated setback for communities such as Friendship Gap. And I've had several meetings with the Water Commission in regards to bringing the Friendship Gap system on stream. And I have been assured that this will be done in a matter of weeks, and I'll be holding them to that promise. Madam Speaker, we have installed wayside tanks in the top Leinster, bottom Leinster, Jobs Hill, Gibbs Hill, and other areas of Castle Division, compliments of Minister Mackenzie. Madam Speaker, history was again made, this time in a community called Grazing. There are two sections in Grazing that are separated by agricultural fields. For the first time, Madam Speaker, residents in one side of Grazing will receive potable water for the first time in their history since the community was established over 40 years ago. This milestone was achieved in partnership with a team from the Jamaica producers. We are now in discussion to bring water to the other side of that community. Madam Speaker, great things are happening in Southeast St. Mary, and we are on track in building back stronger in water. Madam Speaker, on the matter of infrastructure development, the Right Honourable Alok Sharma said infrastructure is the backbone of economic growth. It improves access to basic services such as clean water and electricity, creates jobs and boosts businesses. Southeast St. Mary, Madam Speaker, has been devoid of proper infrastructure for many years. I have embarked on a journey to construct beautiful bus stops across the constituency in Coffee Peace, Borough Road and Rosemont, and I'm not satisfied and therefore will be building much more. I'll be constructing bus stops in Enfield, Grand Old, Chovy, and other areas with the assistance of Minister Bartlett and the team from TBDCO, beautifying our areas while increasing the aesthetic value. Madam Speaker, they say who feels it knows it. And I've listened to the cries of my constituents who have long been calling for these bus stops. Some people think they are not a big deal, but these bus stops provide shelters for everyone, including...
I'm sorry to break you again. Members, Hansard writers are indicating they are not able to hear the members speak, and they are having a challenge documenting. If you are making noise to this level in the Parliament, it is disorderly. And I do not appreciate that comment from you, member. You know better. House, please speak softly. It is not expected that we behave that way in the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. As the saying goes, who feels it knows it. And I've listened to the cries of my constituents daily about providing these important shelters. Madam Speaker, I must take this opportunity, however, to express my disgust towards person or persons who are guilty of stealing the Rosemount bus stop nameplate. It was placed on top of that bus stop to signify pride in the residents of that community, and the theft has robbed them of that feeling. I commend those who have joined me in condemning this act of theft, and I'm appreciative of those who say they will find the perpetrators. Madam Speaker, let me congratulate the Minister of Health and Wellness, the Honourable Minister Tufton, and the entire team at the Ministry for assisting in building new healthcare facilities in my constituency. Madam Speaker, the Anota Bay Hospital is known for excellence in service it provides to its constituents. And I know because I was born there. Madam Speaker, I campaigned that I would like to see this hospital upgraded from a type C to a type B. I knew it was possible. I knew because of the quality of the personnel working in this incredible institution, including the CEO, the matrons, the doctors, the nurses, the porters, the pharmacists, the auxiliary staff, all deserving of commendation. Madam Speaker, they rose to the occasion in COVID. And for every health scare and crisis in this nation, they have always risen to the occasion. The facility, Madam Speaker, I am now happy to report, is now a type B hospital. And this hospital is rated amongst one of the best hospitals in all of Jamaica. Madam Speaker, we are currently also constructing 2 new blocks at the hospital. One will house the orthopedic wing, the lab, and the administrative area, and the other will host a brand new pediatric ward. This, Madam Speaker, will fully transform the institution and increase the workers' ability to save lives. Madam Speaker, this is a reflection of prosperity and the forward-thinking strategies of the Andrew Holness-led administration. Madam Speaker, as we speak, the Anota Bay Clinic is undergoing a comprehensive renovation. Additionally, the Belfield Clinic, that has been a state of disrepair for so many years and is now closed, and its services dispersed to church halls and other health institutions across the space. I am happy to report, Madam Speaker, that a brand new structure will be created with the construction to begin shortly. And I want to thank the Minister of Health, Minister Tufton, Chase Fund, NHF, the Chairman of NERA, and all the staff for their efforts in this regard. I say confidently that the new Belfield Clinic is on its way. Madam Speaker, this is prosperity. This is what this government does. We build, we build, we build. We are the building government, and we will continue to build and be stronger. Madam Speaker, we are building, led by the builder himself, Andrew Holness. And I can assure Jamaicans the same way I assure my constituents. We will not stop building until our mission is complete. Madam Speaker, this is not just word, there is proof. The Anota Bay Fire Station is currently being reconstructed, thanks to the Honourable Desmond McKenzie, Once completed, it will boast a modern facility with improved resources to help the people of Southeast St. Mary and adjoining constituencies. Madam Speaker, as you can see, under infrastructure and development, the constituency of Southeast St. Mary is on track to building stronger. But Madam Speaker, it's impossible to speak about building without mentioning the work that is being done to allow my constituents to have proper housing. It was Carolyn McCarthy that says, public housing is more than just a place to live. Public housing programs should provide opportunities to residents and their families. And that's what we're doing, Madam Speaker, in Southeast St. Mary. But housing and proper housing access remains a problem. And I'm sure other MPs have the same issue. Madam Speaker, it is difficult when someone comes across and asks you for 2 sheets of ply, and they say, Mr. Dunn, I just that want, and you can't give it to them. Because there are so many persons asking for 2 sheets of ply that turns out to be hundreds of plies that CDF and good-thinking citizens are not able to satisfy. But, Madam Speaker, there is so much hope. Because I know my Prime Minister. My Prime Minister is a caring Prime Minister. And something will be done. As a rural MP, we know our rural folks are enterprising. We know they are ambitious. And most times, all they need is a little help. Madam Speaker, we are so grateful for the Prime Minister and the social housing program because we can see tremendous impact it is having on those who benefit from it. Madam Speaker, in Southeast St. Mary, 3 houses are now being constructed and much more to come. But Madam Speaker, here we have one recipient, Barbara on the screen. He's one of the strongest community leaders that I've ever known. He resides in Eshagoli. He's the father of a young man who some persons would refer to as disabled, but we say otherwise able. He's a father to almost all the persons in the constituency. We are currently building a new home for him. Madam Speaker, he is deserving of this upgrade. With a total of 3 bedrooms, Baba and his family will benefit greatly from this program, and I look forward to seeing him make addition to his space as time goes by. Other units are being constructed in the same community in Eshagoli and in Fort George. But Madam Speaker, I know and I can speak for almost all members of Parliament in here. One of the most gratifying moments of my life as a member of Parliament is when I see the smiles on persons' face or faces who benefit from these things. These smiles, Madam Speaker, are priceless. And Madam Speaker, I'm also engaged in the Housing Agency of Jamaica in regards to potential solutions to making Southeast St. Mary's their home. We're also hopeful that we'll be able to construct a new housing scheme in the future as we continue to work with HAG. Madam Speaker, we're working with the relevant agencies to build housing in Southeast St. Mary. We are building homes while we are building lives at the same time. But Madam Speaker, we are looking to build more roads. A few communities so far has benefited from road work across the constituency and even much more to come. We will fix roads once the funds become available. And I know I'm not alone in this regard, as every member of Parliament inside here would want every road fixed in their constituency. So I speak on the people of Brennard. I speak on the people of all the areas who we have upgraded their roads. But the people of Brennard who have a new portion of road that was upgraded recently and an even larger project to come in their Spark program. Madam Speaker, another road, or roads that were completed recently, is the Itabora housing scheme, where all roads in that housing scheme were repaired after more than 20 years of neglect. I'm also happy to report, Madam Speaker, that the Trophy breakaway has finally been completed. And this has been a long-standing issue from when I was a child. vehicles are now able to navigate along that road in a comfortable and safe manner. Madam Speaker, roads continue to be a priority. Under the 40 billion Spark program, roads will be repaired from Body to Coffee Gully, Brennard, Fort George, Cromwell to Orange River will be totally rehabilitated. Other roads such as Long Road, Aleppo, Rock River, Gibbs Hill, Grande Hole, Richmond to Highgate are also slated for improvement. Madam Speaker, I know that these roads will be fixed as the fiscal space increases under the management of the Honorable Prime Minister and Minister Clark. Madam Speaker, I want to turn to a most important thing before my conclusion, and it's about the environment. The environment, Madam Speaker, for the years have been of tremendous impact to the people of Southeast St. Mary. And as you can see on the screen there, a road was almost totally destroyed. Now, Madam Speaker, we are happy to report that that entire section is repaired and a complete beach area restored. So, Madam Speaker, I am a product of Southeast St. Mary. My constituency have placed their trust in me to fix the issues that we have been suffering for far so long. I stand here today with my councillors and management team, filled with pride to all that we have accomplished on the behalf in the most difficult of times. Madam Speaker, I am also hopeful and anxious as we address the many concerns that still exist. Madam Speaker, I can say that Southeast St. Mary is on track to building stronger. We are building stronger in education. We are building stronger in our sporting facilities. We are building stronger for our farmers. We are building stronger with our water system, Madam Speaker. We are building stronger with our infrastructure and developing spaces that is not only efficient, but is aesthetically pleasing. We are building stronger in our environment as we mitigate climate change. Madam Speaker, we are building stronger in access to housing, and we are building stronger in our road work. Madam Speaker, the evidence is clear. The great constituency of Southeast St. Mary is on track to building stronger than ever before. And Madam Speaker, we are cognizant that the race is not for the swift, nor the battle for the strong, but for those who endure it to the end. May God bless you all and bless the people of Southeast St. Mary.
Excellent. Member Dunn. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I'm sure that you all would agree that the member from St. Mary Southeast has opened the innings as an accomplished batsman. And we are very pleased that he was given the latitude, Madam Speaker, to conclude his presentation in the manner that he did. Madam Speaker, before I move the motion for the suspension of the debate for tomorrow, I'd just like to indicate that we do understand the concerns of members concerning the time allocated in the standing orders for these constituency debates. And we do appreciate that much has been done and that there is need for reporting so that constituents can hear their members of parliament, in fact, indicate what has been done in their area. We appreciate also that there are 63 of us that theoretically should contribute to this debate, and that if time was just allowed willy-nilly, then perhaps we would never be able to complete within the sessions provided. So it is for good reason that the time has been structured in the way that it has. However, we do use our discretion from time to time, Madam Speaker, to allow for extensions, and that will continue, I'm sure, with your able guidance as we go on. So I just wanted members to appreciate that this is not at all an effort to constrain in any way, but there's efficiencies in providing a timeline for the presentation of your stewardship. And we look forward to members adhering to this as the debate continues, and that the members will, in fact, give the excellent account of their stewardship, which we know they are able to do. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that the debate be suspended until tomorrow at 2 p.m. When the speakers will continue in the form indicated in the report. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Those in favor? Those opposed, the ayes have it. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move, in keeping with what the able Deputy House Leader indicated just before I arrived, that the agenda for today's activities be reverted in the order before the suspension to allow for the constituency debate to pursue. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
So we will recommit for a statement by ministers. House Leader, House Leader, a moment. Before we do recommittal, I notice a member Dr. Peter Phillips walked in. I haven't seen you in a while, and we would like to welcome you to Parliament as well, Dr. Phillips. It's a pleasure to see you. It's a pleasure to see you here, and the mic system is activated for you.
Madam Speaker, thank you very much for your kind welcome. Madam Speaker, I must say, to be absolutely frank, a major impulse that brought me here today was to see you in your elevated condition. And to be able to witness the hand of impartiality and fairness, which I'm certain will become identified with your period in that chair. Thank you very much for your kind welcome, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Member Phillips. It's a pleasure. House Leader.
Speaker, I'd like on this side to enjoin your welcome to the member, and that he looks the epitome of good health, and we like that. We like that very much, Madam Speaker. And may he continue to enjoy that. Madam Speaker, the ministers today who are slated to make statements are the Minister of Legal and Constitutional Affairs, the Honorable Marlene Malahoo Forte, KCMP, and the Honorable Dr. Christopher Tufton, MP, Minister of Health and Wellness, in that order. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, House Leader. Honorable Marlene Malahoo Forte.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm thinking that pursuant to Standing Order 86, I should seek your leave for suspension of Standing Order 11A1 to enable me to speak for more than 12 minutes to complete the ministerial statement I am about to make. I should be done within 20 minutes or less, and I believe that the approach may prove to be more time efficient and certainly less disruptive.
Mr. Speaker, in keeping with the traditions of the Standing Order, the Leader of the House will indicate to the Honourable House as to the extension of time, if it is so required, for the member. So may it please you, Madam Speaker.
Trying to be time efficient. Mr. Speaker, this ministerial statement is intended to update the Honourable House and the people of Jamaica on the status of the work of the Constitutional Reform Committee, the CRC, during the period March to September 2023. The CRC has been working assiduously to advance the reform priorities under Phase 1, which include patriation of the Constitution of Jamaica, abolition of the constitutional monarchy, establishment of the Republic of Jamaica, and all matters within the deeply entrenched provisions of the Constitution for which a referendum is required to amend. I wish to remind this Honourable House that in November 2022, the Cabinet granted approval for the phased implementation of the matters on which consensus remains, starting with a change from a constitutional monarchy to the Republic of Jamaica and all matters for which a referendum is constitutionally required. I should also highlight and remind the Honourable House that the CRC is building on the work of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform and the Constitutional Commission that were established in the 1990s. Mr. Speaker, I am happy to report that as of September 20, 2023, the CRC has convened 22 meetings, in fact, as of today, 23 meetings, which have provided members with an opportunity to assess how the passage of time has impacted the recommendations of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform contained in its final report of 1995. Advise what fresh perspectives ought to be considered in light of any new national, regional, and international development between then and now, and recommend any necessary modification to update the recommendations for implementation. The confirmed minutes of all meetings to date have been made accessible to the public via the Ministry's website, mlca.gov.jm, and the dedicated Constitutional Reform Road to Republic website, roadtorepublic.mlca.gov.jm. Mr. Speaker, the Constitutional Reform Committee, in accordance with its terms of reference, has formed 3 subcommittees so far. The first is a Public Engagement and Communication Subcommittee. The second, the Youth Strategic Engagement Subcommittee. And thirdly, the State Affairs Subcommittee. The Public Engagement and Communication Subcommittee facilitates the receipt and examination of questions, proposals, and ideas from the Jamaican public and mobilizes interest in the work of the committee. This subcommittee is chaired by Dr. Nadine Spence, or civil society representative. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to announce that to date, we have held consultations in each county with 5 town hall meetings in the parishes of St. James, Manchester, Portland, St. Elizabeth, and Westmoreland. Focus group sensitization meetings were also convened with key stakeholders in St. James, Manchester, Portland, and Westmoreland. The stakeholders who have attended these meetings are from various sectors of the society, including but not limited to the man on the street, private sector, in particular, chambers of commerce in each parish, ministers fraternal, service clubs, community groups, custodes rotulorum, and justices of the peace. Through these town hall meetings and sensitization sessions, the Constitutional Reform Committee was able to meaningfully engage members of the public around critical matters of reform and provide a platform for persons to pose questions, raise issues, share perspectives, and proffer recommendations. Members of the Constitutional Reform Committee have also participated in over 60 consultative activities with a variety of stakeholders. A wide cross-section of Jamaicans has been sensitized on the work to be done in Phase 1, and all issues raised by them have been documented for further deliberation. The committee has also received submissions from 25 individuals and organizations and has heard presentations from 8 stakeholders, namely Mr. Carvel Stewart, the Jamaica Language Unit, Jamaica Left Alliance for National Democracy and Socialism, that's the Jamaica Lands, the National Democratic Movement, NDM, the Advocates Network, We the People, Republic Jamaica, Citizens Action for Free and Fair Elections, that's CAFE, and the Jamaican Bar Association, JAMBAR. Mr. Speaker, a lot has been achieved in our engagements with the public, but we recognize that much more needs to be done. An agreement was entered into between the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs and the Jamaica Information Service, GIS, to execute a national public education campaign aimed at educating Jamaicans on the constitutional reform process, particularly the country's journey from a constitutional monarchy to a republic. The campaign is to run for 2 years in 6-month implementation phases, and it began on August 1 and will run through to August 1, 2025. Mr. Speaker, there is broad consensus, agreement within the committee and the supporting secretariat for an ongoing comprehensive program to educate the nation on the Constitution of Jamaica and our governance system. Engagements with members of the public have revealed a high level of ignorance among the people about the Constitution and basic governance concepts, as well as a lack of understanding of the structure of government. This is truly unfortunate. Mr. Speaker, the committee, through the Secretariat, has also established a dedicated website, roadtorepublic.mlca.gov.jm. I alluded to it earlier. Social media pages on Facebook, Road to Republic Jamaica, on Instagram at Road to Republic Jamaica, on X, formerly Twitter, at Road to Republic. We also have a dedicated WhatsApp number, 876-441-9097. That is 876-441-9097. And an email address, constitutionalreform@mlca.gov.jm. These media are to facilitate the receipt of submissions from the public on matters related to constitutional reform. Through them, the committee has received submissions, compiled and collated a number of issues, questions, and considered perspectives on matters which will inform its recommendations. Mr. Speaker, these issues were published in the print media in September 2023, and I have here in my hand a full-page advertisement showing all the issues that have been raised with the committee through submissions, questions, issues raised in articles written, issues raised in social media, and just about every space that we have been monitoring. And we have asked members of the public to indicate to us if they have any remaining concern or issue that is not represented in the list that we have collated and printed. I can assure this Honourable House, Mr. Speaker, and the people of Jamaica that we will continue to engage and educate the people. The Youth Strategic Engagement Subcommittee has been mandated to facilitate active and inclusive participation of young people in the constitutional reform process, and to ensure that their perspectives, needs, and aspirations are considered and represented in the formulation of recommendations. This subcommittee is chaired by Mr. Sujay Boswell, our youth advisor. The State Affairs Subcommittee, Mr. Speaker, is responsible for reviewing the existing powers exercised by the monarch through the Governor-General under the Constitution and any other relevant laws or by convention to determine what, if any, additional powers should be vested in the office of the President for the Republic of Jamaica. This subcommittee is chaired by Senator Ransford Braham. The Constitutional Reform Committee has also decided to establish a subcommittee in due course to focus on all matters related to the holding of the referendum. Mr. Speaker, I will summarize briefly some of the substantive issues considered by the committee to date. I'm pleased to say, though it should be of no surprise, that within the committee we have reached consensus on the abolition of the constitutional monarchy and on the repatriation of the Jamaica Constitution. There are divergent views on how to achieve the goal of having the Constitution passed in our Parliament and approved by the people of Jamaica without, at this time, writing a new Constitution. I should indicate that members considered and adopted the term Jamaicanizing. This is a term that was first raised in the 1995 report of the Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform. The term simply means that the Constitution, as the supreme law of the land.
Minister, in time allotted. House Leader.
Mr. Chair, Madam, Mr. Chair. No. He's also chair for many things. You know that. In the capacity as Deputy Speaker. And he's now acting for the moment as the Speaker. So he's Mr. Speaker, of course. So, Mr. Speaker, sir. I beg to move that the member's time, in keeping with her own request earlier, be extended sufficiently for her to finish the statement in the time that she had actually indicated. May it please you, Madam, Mr. Speaker.
The motion is on the floor. Those in favor? Those in favor? Ayes have it.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. As I was indicating, members of the committee considered and adopted the term Jamaicanizing. It was a term first raised in the 1995 report, and it means that the Constitution, as the supreme law of the land, should be passed by the Parliament of Jamaica and approved by the people of Jamaica to replace the present arrangement where the Constitution is a schedule to a British order in council. In relation to the establishment of the office of President, the 1995 Joint Select Committee on Constitutional and Electoral Reform, in its report, recommended that the transition to a republic would require a president as the head of state who would be above partisan politics and be vested with powers to appoint persons to certain sensitive national positions. Following extensive deliberations, the committee initially agreed that the new constitution should make provision for the creation of the office of President as the formal head of state of the Republic of Jamaica, to which certain executive powers may be granted. In so determining, the committee affirmed that the office of President would be a separate office from the office of Prime Minister, with the latter serving as the political head of government of the Republic of Jamaica. There was further consensus that the head of state should be nominated by the head of government in consultation with the leader of the opposition and confirmed by the Parliament via affirmative resolution on a vote of 2/3 majority. And this supermajority would signal consensus on the selection of the President. Mr. Speaker, the committee also considered several contingencies should a vote of the Parliament be unsuccessful in confirming the President. The committee, in light of this, has considered making a proposal that the incumbent hold over or the Prime Minister appoint an interim President in the absence of an incumbent. Where such an interim President is to be put forward for confirmation by the Parliament, this would require the Prime Minister nominating the candidate after consultation with the Leader of the Opposition. In our meeting of September 27, just last week, Mr. Speaker, as we took stock of the perspectives in the public space, the committee considered the need for greater clarity in the forms of President, having regard to the seeming confusion in the public domain. We examined 3 categories. The first, Mr. Speaker, and I really invite the attention of all members of Parliament to this matter. The first is the executive president. It is the presidential system where the head of state is politically selected or elected, with executive powers covering substantial areas of government. The second category is the non-executive president, who is a formal head of state performing merely ceremonial functions. The third is a formal head of state who does not perform only ceremonial functions, but in whom is vested certain powers which do not involve the daily administration of government. And this third category reflects a model that is above partisan politics and not merely ceremonial in nature. Mr. Speaker, we considered matters relating to qualification for membership in Parliament, and there is consensus among committee members that at a minimum, Jamaican citizenship, not Commonwealth citizenship, should be the qualifying citizenship for membership in the Parliament of Jamaica. There are divergent views around the inclusion of residency requirement, and we have not finalized our deliberations on this matter at this time. The committee also considered whether persons with dual citizenship should be eligible to sit as members of Parliament, and determined that a test of allegiance would be necessary. The committee noted that the Constitution in its current form has contemplated various ways to deal with persons who possess dual or multiple citizenship and their involvement in the Parliament of Jamaica. A test of allegiance was therefore seen as necessary in resolving any contention that may arise from conflicting allegiance. The committee considered it important to design the rules on eligibility with sufficient flexibility to attract the best public servants to produce the best outcome for a nation. I should make it clear that this is an update on the deliberations. We have not concluded on the matters, nor have we formulated our recommendations yet. Mr. Speaker, the constitutional life of Parliament may only be extended if Jamaica is at war. The committee noted that the Constitution makes no provision for the extension of the life of Parliament in the case of public emergencies such as a pandemic, and we have so much to learn coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Accordingly, the committee in principle has agreed that the life of Parliament could be extended when a public emergency arose. It agreed that where it is not practical to hold general elections due to circumstances created by or as a result of the occurrence of any earthquake, hurricane, flood, fire, outbreak of pestilence, infectious disease, or other calamity, whether similar to the foregoing or not, the life of Parliament should continue beyond its normal term for a period not exceeding 2 years in total. The committee further noted that the period of extension should be limited to one not exceeding 6 months in the first instance, and other periods not exceeding 6 months, up to a maximum of 2 years, where necessary. It was suggested that the initial proclamation should be done by the President, acting on the advice of the Prime Minister in consultation with the Leader of the Opposition. Subsequent extensions should be done by the Parliament for a period not exceeding 6 months on a vote of a majority of the House of Representatives. If the circumstances persist and require further extensions, such vote should be held with a majority of 2/3 of the House. Mr. Speaker, turning to the issue of the final appellate court. It has been agreed that the phasing of the work of the Constitutional Reform Committee was necessary to, among other things, allow for the building of consensus where it does not currently exist. It has also been agreed that consideration of which final court for the Republic of Jamaica would be done in Phase 2. I should inform the House that the Jamaican Bar Association made a submission to the committee which included recommendations for Jamaica to accede to the appellate jurisdiction of the Caribbean Court of Justice. Mr. Speaker, the parliamentary opposition members of the committee have called on the government to publicly state its position on the CCJ. I reported that call to the Cabinet. It was considered, and I believe in short order the Prime Minister will speak on that issue. I should say that the government is paying close attention to the poll results on the matter concerning the final court, as well as all of the matters relating to constitutional reform. Mr. Speaker, there is and should be no disagreement that it is unacceptable and untenable to continue with an arrangement where Jamaicans need a visa to access their final court. Mr. Speaker, on August 2, 2023, I provided audience to members of the committee following a request from committee member Dr. Lloyd Barnett for a special meeting. Some members expressed concerns about the approach taken by the government in amending the ordinary provisions of Section 96(1) and 121(1) of the Constitution. They clarified that the bane of their contention was not a question of law, but one of courtesy, as the tabling of the bill to amend the Constitution to extend the tenure of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the Auditor General was done without their knowledge or input. Members did not contend that the government had no legal power to act as it did, as they believe the Constitution allowed for the provisions in question to be amended by a majority of the members of the House. However, given the committee's remit, there was an expectation among some members that the committee would have been either consulted or informed of any decision to amend the Constitution. Members further conveyed that courtesy and respect were important, particularly in the context of the work being done and the demands of the public for greater trust and accountability. I reported the concerns faithfully to the Cabinet. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I wish to say that we have embarked on a momentous journey. We are in uncharted waters. It requires very careful navigation. Accordingly, Mr. Speaker, we seek God's guidance and wisdom on the right path to take and understanding to make wise choices. I commit to continue to provide periodic updates to this Honourable House and the people of Jamaica on the progress of the constitutional reform program. Thank you.
Statement by Minister. Continue, Honourable.
Mr. Speaker, I want to first commend the Minister for her update on the constitutional reform thus far to the Honourable House. I want to further commend the Minister, Mr. Speaker, for the manner in which, the collegial manner in which she has conducted the affairs of the committee. She has shown a willingness to listen, to respond, and to be responsive to the concerns expressed by members of the committee, and I would dare say, from without the committee. I think she has demonstrated a willingness to listen and to be responsive. Madam Speaker, I think by and large the Minister has been very faithful to the proceedings so far. There are two matters, however, that I just wish to comment on in my response, which is, I think on the matter of the President and the appointment of the President. My response is not so much in terms of what has been said, but what has not been said. And I think just for clarity, and precisely because the deliberation continues, I would wish to say that there had arisen in the public space some amount of question, controversy concerning the methodology that was discussed within the CRC about the appointment of the President. And the detail, Madam Speaker, the detail is really around an innovation that was being discussed within the CRC around the both houses coming together, sitting jointly, to represent, to symbolize a unity around the presidency, which is one of the objectives that was being sought by the committee. But the critical question as to whether they would vote separately or together is a matter, I think, of fundamental importance and on which there is yet to be consensus. And I think that that point is of concern, correctly, rightly so, to arrange a number of persons, and I think the discussion continues. Madam Speaker, on the matter of the final appellate court, I note again the Minister represents broader the sentiments that have been expressed within the committee. The Minister, in concluding on that point, makes it lucidly clear that on the matter of the visa and requiring a visa to go to attend upon the final Court of Appeal to have audience, both by judges and litigants, by attorneys and litigants, that it is unacceptable for there to be a visa requirement. Madam Speaker, that is clearly the case, and in that the opposition joins and has been very clear and consistent on that point. But I wish to also make the point, Madam Speaker, that the issue goes beyond simply the visa. The issue of the final court is really a fundamental, far more fundamental than that. In fact, it is a question of how will it work, where the Privy Council itself is an advisory council to the King. Now, if you remove the King and you repatriate our sovereignty and we have our head of state, then to whom will you continue to appeal? Madam Speaker, these are fundamental inconsistencies.
The member's time for speaking has expired.
Yeah, just a few minutes. I don't know.
Madam Speaker, we take note that the member is in full stride responding, we take further note of the time that is allocated in this regard. We also want to urge that since this is not a fulsome debate on the report of the committee that is dealing with the Constitution, and that report will appropriately come to this House at the conclusion of the deliberations, that we avoid the issues that really ought to be dealt with by a committee that is to come to us, for us to deliberate on at a future date at this time. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Any questions? Questions?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well,
your time for speaking expired, and based on the statement made by the House Leader, your debate style 5 minutes presentation would be facilitated when a fulsome debate is being conducted. And so I'm looking to members of the House whether or not there are persons who would like to avail themselves of the opportunity to ask questions.
I'm simply requesting sufficient time to conclude. I'm making 3 points.
It's important as we move along to enable efficiencies within the House and that every member gets a full opportunity to express what concerns they have. That we do it also recognizing that, no, but member, just, the point is that the purpose of a response to the minister is essentially to get clarification and elucidation, and therefore question is the root. So we do allow for the opposition spokesperson on the subject to be given some latitude to make a statement, but it is not an eternal comment. So ask the question.
No, I actually allowed in excess of 5 minutes because the idea was to allow sufficient time to complete, notwithstanding the 5 minutes of the standing order. However, after that period, we usually move to questions. So, Member Hilton, please ask your questions, and then we will take opposition leader in respect of his questions. Could you turn your mic on, please?
Madam Speaker, thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me just, the point I was making, this was an update to the House, and I had no issue with the minister's statement. I was simply trying to clarify where there remains some areas for clarity as we try to communicate to the wider population. And I've said there are 3 issues on which I'd just like to comment. I've commented on one, and I was on the other 1.5. So it's not a question to the minister. It's a point of clarification, which is that on the matter of the final appellate court, the issue, the substantive issue around which there's need for discussion is not simply on the matter of the visa. There's also a fundamental issue on the matter of the inconsistency of the structural and legal inconsistency in having to appeal to a king who is no longer head of our court. The final, yes, the final.
Members, Member Hilton, Member Hilton, would you please be so kind as to just take your seat for a moment? Members, I'm encouraging you all members of the House to pay close attention to the standing orders. You are going to see the operation of the Parliament in such a way by the Speaker that sticks very closely to these standing orders, and it will apply across the board. The House Leader is also going to support that because we literally want to be able to have a very orderly House. And orderly not just in behavior, which is lacking, but order in the efficiency with which we speak. So instead of spending the time to do certain, I won't even go into the platitudes, get to the point, use your time efficiently and wisely so that we can move on with the business of the day. So Member Hilton, this latitude is wide latitude with the way we will be conducting the House going forward. You are getting that latitude today, and that example now will be followed by all the members afterwards. 5 minutes, and it will be 5 minutes, no further extension. Go to your question, member.
Finally, Madam Speaker, it's a matter of the role for the diaspora. That is a matter that has arisen within the CRC, and it's a matter we believe of significance to our diaspora, and I believe forms part of the discussion and the update to the House that I think the Minister could well comment on. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Minister, for your update. A couple of questions. I noticed on page 6 at the top, where you're dealing with the matter of how the new head of state would be put in place, so to speak, that there's reference to the person being nominated by the head of government after consultation with the leader of the opposition and confirmed by the Parliament via affirmative resolutions, plural, of a 2/3 majority vote. I'm seeking clarity on that phrasing. To my mind, it's going to be critical that whoever becomes the president have bipartisan support. And we certainly wouldn't be in favor of any system which enables a government of whatever side with a substantial majority in the House of 2/3 or more to be able to effectively put in place a president that didn't have bipartisan support. So we're very much in favor of a structure that ensures that the Senate has their own vote on that matter, even if it's in a common sitting, but the votes would be separately taken. Because as you know, in the structure of our Constitution, a 2/3 majority is not achievable among senators without the opposition being on board. So that's a very important point for us, and I was asking for you to clarify that, given the phrasing of what is here. Secondly, the issue of extensions of the life of Parliament beyond 5 years. Currently, since independence, it's only been extendable in the event of war. We've never had cause for such an extension. This is saying that if there's a public emergency, there could be extensions for up to 2 years beyond the 5 years in 6 months, rolling 6 month periods. Essentially, at the instance of the House of Representatives, provided certain majorities exist. Now, in the last 10 years, the majority of the time, the House, the governing side, whether it be PNP or JLP, have had at least 2/3 of the members. Since the 2012 to 2016 government, the PNP had 2/3 of the members, and since 2020, the JLP has had over 2/3. So, in our first past the post system, the possibility of very large majorities is a very live issue, and I certainly would not support the notion that based on one side determining there's a public emergency, they can extend the life of their government beyond 5 years. I think that's a very dangerous concept. And we've seen the way in which states of emergency have been deployed under this government. There have been multiple states of emergency since 2017. So it's a live issue, and this raises grave concerns for me. And the last point I would make at this juncture is just to say that the question of the legislation that was brought here, tabled and passed without any consultation with the opposition or with the committee itself on the extension of the term of office of the DPP is a matter that is now sub judice because we have brought proceedings to contest the lawfulness of that legislation under the Constitution. So I don't propose to say anything more on it because that matter is a live issue now before the Constitutional Court. Thank you, Madam Speaker, for your indulgence. I don't know how many minutes I was, but I appreciate the time.
Thank you. Go ahead, Minister.
Madam Speaker, the issue of the extension of the life of the Parliament is a matter that falls within the deeply entrenched provisions of the Constitution. The discussions so far really have been limited to issues of public disaster, really, though the term public emergencies has been used. And if you note the examples I cited, those would be examples where it is clear and not where it is contested. I appreciate the concern of the Leader of the Opposition. You really wouldn't want a Parliament to be extended in circumstances where it is contested that something has occurred that would prevent the Parliament from sitting. I certainly do not anticipate in how the matter has been discussed internally that it should be contentious. Because we're not talking about matters of crime and violence or how the state of emergency. The matter arose simply because it is one of the deeply entrenched provisions, and that is how the discussion arose. We just came out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there are lessons to be learned from that. So I do not anticipate that it would be contentious. That would call for
I'm just asking the movement from the current 3 months to a proposal of 2 years at 6-month increments. What is the specific mischief that we're trying to cure by making that proposal? That's all I want to ask.
I'm sorry, it's not a current 3 months that exists in the Constitution, but the prediction is that we can, with the change in the climate, natural disasters can occur. We know that, I would say that to engage in a detailed discussion of the matter at this stage would be premature because it is not meant to be contentious. It's really considering that having come out of a pandemic and with the prediction for natural disasters and other pandemics, we may find ourselves in a constitutional crisis. And since the provision is a deeply entrenched provisions and we are dealing with those provisions, it is worth consideration. But be assured that the views of the opposition have been faithfully represented on all issues. And in fact, I commend the opposition members who have been very clear in raising any concern of the parliamentary opposition. Bear in mind that when you are formulating a constitution, you're not formulating a constitution for a present-day government. And any side may be in government, any side may be in opposition, and you want to ensure that the rules are such that they can be exercised properly. So it's not about an administration at this time having a supermajority that you intend. We have seen where we have erred in the past in thinking that one side may remain in government or opposition. And with hindsight, we certainly do not want to make the same mistake. In respect of the matter of the vote for the president, I think the views are converging around that the vote be taken separately. And again, it's not a matter of which side is in government, no. It's really how you want to exercise the power that will ensure that you emerge with an office holder that is a symbol of national unity and national identity. I certainly it makes no sense to make mistakes that are clearly avoidable. The views of the opposition are known. The views are not unique to the opposition. In fact, those views were the views of the Jamaica Labour Party at one time. And I believe the last time I made a statement, I indicated how interesting it is that some views, regardless of who form government, will be government views. And regardless of who form opposition, will be opposition views. Because we're seeing now that positions taken by the then opposition Labour Party are now positions reflected by the current PNP opposition and vice versa. On the other issue of the final court, there are many more aspects to which final court to be discussed other than the untenable situation of having a visa requirement. I'm not going to go into the detail at this stage. The issue of which final court must be subject to a full-blown debate, Just to say in passing, though, that you would know that for jurisdictions like Trinidad and Tobago, which continues to have the Privy Council as their final court, it is a court and not His Majesty's Judicial Committee, so that the institution has evolved fully and separately from His Majesty. But that is not a matter that we will debate at this time, because I fully appreciate that the matter is much wider. And I think the role of the diaspora, I alluded to it when I indicated that the thinking of the committee was to design the rules of participation with sufficient flexibility so that we can access the pool of Jamaicans who will emerge as the best public servants for the best outcome of the people. This is not a debate really on the issues at this time. It's really an update to the House. I hope that my answer has clarified the concerns.
Next will be the Minister of Health and Wellness, Honorable Dr. Christopher Tufton, MP. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and my commendations on your elevation, given that I was not present in the House when it was happening. And I've used up 15 seconds of my time to do that because I think it's well worth it. Madam Speaker, I wish to update this Honourable House on the dengue outbreak since its declaration on Saturday, September 23rd, 2023. Data as of Friday, September 29th, 2023 from the Ministry's National Surveillance Unit showed that the number of presumed, suspected, and confirmed dengue cases has increased to 1,117. Of that number, 160 are confirmed dengue cases, serotype 2, 1 serotype 3, and 1 serotype 4, which therefore clearly states that the dominant strain is serotype 2. So it's 158 serotype 2, 1 serotype 3, and 1 serotype 4. This increase has pushed the country past the dengue epidemic threshold, as stated before, for July, August, and September. The threshold, Madam Speaker and colleagues, being what has been a moving average over a few years, and we are now seeing an elevated number above that average month over month. It must be noted, Madam Speaker, that while Jamaica has seen continuous local transmission and the dengue virus since 1977, the presence of the type 2 strain has not been identified in the population since 2010. We had announced that there were 6 deaths being investigated, Madam Speaker. 5 of those deaths have now been classified. Regrettably, Madam Speaker, 1 death was due to dengue. Of the 5, 3 were classified as suspected dengue-related deaths, and 1 was not a dengue-related death. The 6th death remains under investigation. All parishes have recorded dengue cases, Madam Speaker, with Kingston and St. Andrew reporting the highest number of cases year to date. However, when the cases are assessed by population, St. Thomas, Portland, Kingston, and St. Andrew, St. Catherine, and Hanover have the highest rates, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the 15 to 14-year-old age cohort continues to be the most affected. So younger persons. And the explanation for that, Madam Speaker, is that this is the population that is least exposed to this particular strain. Just for public education purposes, there are 4 strains, and the type 2 strain we haven't seen since 2010, so the older population would have been exposed, the younger not so, and they become therefore the most vulnerable because it is a novel strain for them. I'm therefore, Madam Speaker, using the opportunity again to urge parents to exercise vigilance with their children and teens and to take the necessary action to reduce the incidence of dengue among this vulnerable population. Madam Speaker, I will also say for those with compromised immune systems, including the older population, they should also be careful of the virus and the Aedes aegypti mosquito. I want to remind Jamaicans that dengue is ordinarily a mild disease. Persons get a fever, headache, joint and muscle pains. The illness is often resolved through rest and adequate hydration along with paracetamol to treat the accompanying fever. However, on occasions, the illness can progress to severe dengue, which can result in organ failure, bleeding, and severe fluid depletion that can lead to shock and, of course, as indicated earlier, death. Therefore, it is important, colleagues, Madam Speaker, for persons experiencing fever, vomiting, severe abdominal pain, bleeding under the skin, feeling very weak or getting confused to seek immediate medical attention. Madam Speaker, in terms of the mitigation plan, which has already been triggered and spoken about, the Ministry and the regional health authorities have made the necessary preparations for a possible outbreak, and we had spoken about it prior to the outbreak being declared. Since 2019, the government of Jamaica, through the Ministry of Health and Wellness, has made significant investments in dengue control program. We have spent over 300 million Jamaican dollars, Madam Speaker, in acquisition of vehicles, fogging machines, and the expansion of a number of staff dedicated to the vector management program. You do recall, or would recall, that in 2019 we had a one-year dengue outbreak by clinical definition. And that period was quite intense in terms of the work that was required. The government, led by the Honorable Prime Minister, of course, committed, and we spent over 300 million to refleet our stock. And we have benefited from that over the years and will benefit from now with this particular response. Since declaring the outbreak, Madam Speaker, the Ministry has initiated its dengue outbreak mitigation plan, which has the following components: the search and destroy operations, clinical management, workforce management, surveillance, and public education. The aim of the plan is to reduce the impact of the dengue outbreak on the population. Madam Speaker, approximately 500 temporary vector control workers have been engaged and deployed across the island to high-risk communities, along with some 213 permanent workers. An additional 600 temporary workers are now being engaged, so we're actually hiring temporary workers to increase the search and destroy and health education component of the response. Since July 2023, Madam Speaker, the parish health departments have been engaged in enhanced fogging and treatment of breeding sites. This has resulted in a 7-day extended work week for fogging and other mosquito eradication activities by the team. It should also be noted, Madam Speaker, colleagues, that we are currently addressing the high-risk communities, and we remind the members of the public to support fogging exercise and to welcome workers in their communities. You will recall that we have had communities where workers have been stoned or abused and not allowed in the communities for one reason or the other. We want to discourage that, but we also want to remind the public, or those tempted so to do, that it is against the law and they can be prosecuted for this. On a note of caution, Although most persons should not be affected, persons with respiratory or other health challenges are asked to use a damp, wet cloth to cover nose and mouth to avoid any adverse effects during the fogging exercise. So if you think you have an allergy or you have some other condition that may be affected by fogging, then you can use particular measures like a damp cloth to cover the nose and mouth for protection. A part of our clinical management of dengue, Madam Speaker, we are resensitizing.
Minister, your time for speaking has expired. House Leader.
Madam Speaker, yes. The member's time having been expired, I beg to move that his time be extended by 5 minutes in order to complete the presentation. And Madam Speaker, while we say that, we just want to reiterate for all members that the way forward is going to be a way in which the efficiencies of this House must be appreciated and realized. And so we ask all members, and member, just to make the point, that in most of the parliament and congresses of the world, members get a minute, and they speak, and they are efficient in that minute. So I just made that point. Madam Speaker, may it please. Please, Madam.
Thank you, House Leader. The question is that Minister's time for speaking be extended by 5 minutes. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. Minister Tufton.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the time. I wouldn't want to run the risk that the government be accused of withholding information when we have an outbreak, so I appreciate the time. Since July 2023, Madam Speaker, the parish health departments have been engaged in enhancing fogging and treatment of breeding sites. A 7-day work week program has been implemented. We are currently addressing the high-risk communities, so we have actually assessed those based on the Aegis index, the amount of mosquito we discern from containers of breeding sites. And we remind members of the public to support, of course. I think I had said that. We are also working with physicians in health on the treatment protocol for dengue, especially severe dengue. We are examining our inventory of drugs, commodities, and management of blood and blood products. We have launched a number of blood drives just to ensure that we have supplies for those who may need it. Additionally, Madam Speaker, the Ministry has extended hours for all Type 3 to 5 health centers to 8 p.m. Starting Monday, October 2nd, 2023. This is to facilitate people visiting these facilities to receive treatment and referrals where necessary. So health facilities opening hours will be extended. At the same time, children under the age of 18 years old who visit the University Hospital of the West Indies will not be charged a fee or be required to pay for services at the facility. We do expect increased demand, particularly at the Bustamante Hospital for children, so we will accommodate the overflow at the University Hospital at no charge for children, for young people up to 18 years. Madam Speaker, our National Health Emergency Operations Center, as well as the Health Emergency Operations Centers in all parishes have been activated. These will provide critical surveillance information, as well as manage interventions in high-risk areas. The Ministry has also developed a public information program that includes targeting messages related to search and destroy action around homes and places that have high density for human interaction, on how to protect children, warning signs for dengue, how to treat dengue, and the types of drugs to be used, and personal responsibility around dengue mitigation in our surroundings. The most effective response is really people response, looking for breeding sites in and around the home, destroying those. And the public education program is key, as well as how the symptoms and medication to be applied. A critical part of our mitigation plan is forging partnerships, and so we are collaborating with agencies and ministries, the Ministry of Education and Youth, the Municipal Corporation, the National Works Agency, Solid Waste Management Authority, the regional teams, and NWA. The regional teams from both my ministry and the Ministry of Education and Youth have met, decided on several actions, including meeting of school principals for greater collaboration, training of school personnel in search and destroy action, and the removal of bulky waste from school properties. Working with the Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development, we have engaged the municipal corporations for the purpose of community-based interventions like drain cleaning, removal of bulky waste, search and destroy operations, and community sensitization. Approximately $96 million have been provided to support mitigation works through the Ministry of Local Government and the municipal corporations. The National Works Agency will coordinate the cleaning of major drains in the high-risk communities, which have been determined by the Vector Unit working with the parish offices, and this will be funded through the National Health Fund to the tune of some $160 million Jamaican. The National Health Fund has also provided $75 million through the National Solid Waste Management Authority for removal of bulky waste, which effectively represents primary breeding sites in communities across the country, and certainly the high-risk communities. We believe in partnerships, Madam Speaker, so we are discussing with the private sector and other non-governmental organizations to increase awareness, to garner support for the necessary response to this outbreak. We invite, Madam Speaker, in closing, the Jamaican people to join the fight to preserve life and livelihood, to work with themselves in their communities, but also with the authorities around identifying breeding sites and the Aedes aegypti mosquito, and to play their part in terms of addressing the most effective response. Madam Speaker, we have been down this road before. We have had 1 year of it in 2019, so there's no magic one to it. It really is an issue of how we manage ourselves, our environment, and collaborate with the respective agencies to create awareness and response. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you for your update to the House. Minister, I know that the declaration of the outbreak occurred on Saturday, September 23, just over a week ago, but also that the increase in cases pushed the country past the epidemic threshold for July, August, and September. And we've now had some deaths. Of the 5 that have been classified, only 1 has been classified other than dengue related. And so we're in a serious situation now. We've now entered a period of regular rainfall as opposed to July and August, which were dry months. So I really want to ask, why did we take so long, given that the data showed that the threshold had been passed, and we'd gone from July, and we have had our 2019 experience? Why have we waited till now to deal with this matter when it seems to be, you know, we're in a kind of crisis mode with over 1,000 cases of suspected dengue and so on, and we're in a rainy season, which makes it much harder to manage the proliferation of mosquito breeding, because every potted plant, every tire, every container is a potential breeding site with water, rainwater flowing almost on a daily basis. So I really wonder why we were so dilatory in getting on top of this thing when the data from July showed that we had passed the epidemic threshold.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I would say that the member, I appreciate the question, and I would not frame the question in that way if I may be so presumptuous, because implicit in it is suggesting that we're not on top of it. And I want to reassure the member that we are on top of the outbreak, or certainly the situation, which involves all of us. The first issue of why is because of data lag. I mean, you don't collect the data in real time, unfortunately. You have a number of centennial sites around the country. The information has to be collected, tabulated, assessed. So the epidemiological function that is involved in the data normally lags a few months. And so we report as it becomes available. Having said that, I would also say that we have historical data that tells us when we will have a greater threat level. Droughts and heavy rains. And we are experiencing, or up to recently, drought conditions where a lot of storage of water, improper storage. And in collaboration with our partners regionally, because in the Americas, dengue is now a major issue. So it's not just Jamaica. We have been making preparations, but we could not declare officially an outbreak until the data was available. But that does not mean we have not mobilized the troops in the field, sensitized the critical public health team at the parish level or otherwise, and they weren't out there doing their work. And I suspect it is because of that why we are in a better position in terms of the unfortunate death that I've just reported. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Minister, I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. I was looking through the program that has been undertaken and seeing some sums, different sums for different activities, whether it is the $96 million for mitigation, the $160 million to the ministry, to the National Health Fund, the $75 million to solid waste, and so on. And I believe that often when we're doing these kinds of programs, we give these broad sums. And I think that at times it is important to actually understand the procurement process, understand how it has been distributed and what guides it, and have some kind of a breakdown in terms of parish and communities along the lines that you had identified where it is that we had the greatest outbreak.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Oh, you want to ask the other question, or you want me to? Madam Speaker, should I yield on?
Madam Speaker, thank you. Through you, Madam Speaker, to the Minister. The status of the PCR testing for dengue by the National Public Health Lab. Have they received the reagents, and have they still being forced to send samples to CARFA? And what are the wait times, time on results from CARFA? Also, since we have the Minister of Education here too, and I see where in your statement, Minister, speak about the schools and the age of students. And in my visits to a few schools in my own constituency, the Ministry of Education or the Health Department have been giving warnings to school administrations about proper cleaning and debushing around the schools. And will there be any additional resources being given to the schools to ensure that these debushings are done on a regular basis? In one instance where the Health Department told the school to make sure they keep the lawn at a certain height, to prevent the breeding of mosquitoes. But also, will the monies going to the National Works Agency, will that be in consultation with the members of Parliament? And if we do have a breakdown on what it will be getting parish by parish, so that we can effect these drain cleanings or assist in these drain cleanings in a short space of time.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So in the first question from the member around the allocation and how they are determined. So what we did in the early stages a few months back was to ask the vector unit member. I want you to be right. You can have the sweets later. No, what we did, we asked the vector unit to do an assessment when the reports were available and where the highest Aedes aegypti index were, where the highest population of mosquitoes were, and develop a work program for starting with those areas. And it is that work program that determines a budget and how the budget is allocated. I don't have all the areas with me, but there is a report that was generated internally which identified the parishes and the places in the parishes. Normally to the low-lying areas where you have the drainage and the stagnant water, and also areas where you store a lot of water. But for a National Works Agency perspective, it was felt that some of the drains required a Works Agency response. For public education and so on, we felt that the municipal authority with the councillors at the more micro level would be best able to deal with that. And solid waste, because there are places where there's a lot of solid waste. I mean, I went into your area the last outbreak, Member Phillips, and I saw an area where there are about 100 used tires. And as you approach, there was a swarm of mosquitoes. So you have that. So it was important, we felt, to tackle that first. And the determination was based on a plan that was done by the technical team in conjunction with the parishes. I do believe, and I've said, that once they are going in an area where obviously the political representative should be informed. So that will happen. The testing. So we do test now for dengue, and we have all the material to do tests. The challenge we had a few weeks back, which I need to check to see if it has been addressed, was the reagents for testing when the period would have passed for a while and you needed to test for the antibodies. And that was, they had some issues with material. And they couldn't get it. That really was the issue. But they were trying to source it. I'd need to check to see. But once you have the symptoms within a particular period of time, we have the capacity to test to determine if you're positive or not here in Jamaica. But I'll check to see whether or not the reagents for a test that would have fallen outside of that vulnerable period is available. But they would be seeking to get that. Thank you, Madam Speaker. The first stop for us when we were looking at the dengue risk would be the Ministry of Education and the schools. So all the parish health teams have been mandated to visit all schools. We started that prior to the reopening and just after the reopening. It's a routine, but with the outbreak and the projections that would lead us to an outbreak, we have done that, and we have looked at the storage areas for water, yes, the particular places where they could be vulnerable, because again, the population that's most vulnerable falls in that cohort. So we're actually paying keen attention, and I would certainly encourage our MPs, our political reps, and others to work with the schools. I'm actually visiting a few schools over the next week or so to try and drum up the support and the publicity around it. Madam Speaker, I didn't say this in my presentation, but I want to say that this allocation and response is the start of a process, because it is projected, based on what the EPI team tells me, that the outbreak could last into the end of this year and early into the new year. And maybe it's information we should make public, because we need to prepare ourselves for it. You don't just turn it on and turn it off. So we're likely to see a continuation of high levels going into the end of the year to early new year. So I anticipate that we will have to speak to additional planning and execution over that period of time.
I'm just saying, though, Minister, that even though the assessments are being done and the monitoring at the schools, is that even though you're providing additional funds, but also that the schools administrations get some additional funds for that debushing, even though there's more money going to the Ministry of Local Government for garbage removal, it is a real issue out there now, especially at schools, the build-up of garbage. I know that there were 50 trucks that were added, but there's a reoccurrence of the pile-up of garbage, and that needs to be taken into serious consideration. Because what we don't want is for the breakout in the school environment, but how it is that we prevent it from happening. And I think that some additional resources to the schools
and the regular cleanup of garbage at the schools will be one way in dealing with that.
Speaking for the Minister, but we work very closely together. There is an MOU, I understand, with the Ministry of Education and NSWMA that the Ministry pays for waste removal. And I suspect, given the discussions we are having and the heightened alertness, that would become a lot more prominent in terms of the response. And as it relates to debushing, I'm sure the Minister would speak to that if necessary, but I take the point.
Thank you, Minister. We will continue with the items on the agenda. Recommittal of announcements next.
Thank you, Madam. Members, please note that further to the announcement that the report of the Ethics Committee of the House of Representatives on its deliberations on the motion for exemption brought on behalf of the Member of Parliament for Kingston East and Port Royal is not before the House at this time.
Thank you. Bills brought from the Senate.
The following is a message from the President of the Senate. To the Honorable House of Representatives, I have the honor to advise the Honorable House of Representatives that on the 29th day of September 2023, a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Child Care and Protection Act was passed in the Honorable Senate without amendment. Thomas Tavares Finson, OJ, CD, KC, JP, President of the Senate.
Questions and answers to questions.
Madam Speaker, could I invite the Prime Minister to answer the questions that have been tabled in my name?
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member from St. Andrews South East for the questions. Question number one, can the Prime Minister indicate whether or not a development order for Kingston and St. Andrew and the Pedro Keys was confirmed? If yes, please indicate when this development order was confirmed. Yes, I can confirm that the Town and Country Planning, Kingston and St. Andrew and the Pedro Keys Provisional Development Order 2017 was confirmed by me on the 16th day of March 2023. The notification confirming the Town and Country Planning, Kingston and St. Andrew and the Pedro Keys Provisional Development Order 2017 was published in the Jamaica Gazette Supplement on the 5th of April 2023. So, Madam Speaker, it was confirmed on the 16th of March and gazetted on the 5th of April 2023. Question number two, if the answer to part one is in the affirmative, would the Prime Minister indicate whether the confirmed development order for Kingston and St. Andrew and the Pedro Keys is identical to the 2017 Provisional Development Order? If no, can the Prime Minister identify the specific sections that were changed and provide details on any and all modifications thereto? The confirmed development order reflects a number of changes to the earlier published development order, development order. These changes were informed by consultations with interested persons, objections from landowners, policy decisions taken by the authority, as well as editorial and otherwise corrections and updates. These changes are outlined in the confirmation notification dated the 5th of April 2023 and includes but not limited to the following sections: interpretation and definitions, boundary descriptions, sectoral and general policies which deal with transportation, housing, conservation of the natural and built environment, urban economy, tourism, waste treatment and disposal, coastal development to include the development of the quays and the control of advertisements. It also listed changes to policies affecting all local planning areas, zoning, density and heights in major nodes and along major corridors, as reflected in the local area policies and relevant maps, minimum lot sizes for studios, minimum lot sizes on which multifamily developments can be allowed, and typographical changes and minor amendments. Question number 3. Can the Prime Minister confirm if any public consultations were held prior to the finalization of the confirmed development order? If yes, please indicate when and with whom these consultations took place. Answer: I can confirm that many consultative meetings, engagements, discussions, and otherwise were convened with different stakeholders. Stakeholder consultations formed a critical component of the planning process during the preparation of the height and density study commissioned by the authority. Generally, the stakeholders consulted include members of Parliament, several of whom are in this room, were consulted, the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, landowners and persons with interest in lands, members of the private sector, professional groups, the Jamaica Institute of Architects, the Jamaica Institution of Engineers and Commissioned Land Surveyors of Jamaica, attorneys, Jamaica Developers Association, the Independent Developers Group, community groups and citizens associations, educational institutions, churches, ministries, departments and agencies, and non-governmental organizations. Part 2, Section 5.3 of the Town and Country Planning Act specifies that so soon as may be after the preparation of any provisional development order, the authority shall cause to be published in the Gazette and at intervals of not less than 7 or more than 10 days in 3 issues of a local daily newspaper, a notice. So, Madam Speaker, the public notice specifies inter alia the provision that is made under Section 6 of the Act for objections to any provision and or policy in the Provisional Development Order. Notices, Madam Speaker, were published in the daily newspaper in accordance with the Part 2, Section 5.3 of the Town and Country Planning Act on the 6th of August 2017, the 13th of August 2017, and the 20th of August 2017. In addition to the foregoing, several public consultations were undertaken by the National Environmental and Planning Agency on behalf of the authority in collaboration with the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation and other key stakeholders. Madam Speaker, we've provided a table for those who have copies of the answers, written copies. The table outlines the stakeholder consultations held on the Kingston and St. Andrew and Pedro Keys provisional development orders. It's quite extensive, Madam Speaker. I'm not proposing to read it into the record, but it is quite extensive. Question number 4. Can the Prime Minister indicate whether the confirmed development order has been gazetted? If no, is there a, well, Madam Speaker, I think we have answered that question. The Town and Country Planning, Kingston and St. Andrew and Pedro Keys Provisional Development Order 2017 Confirmation Notification 2023 was published in the Jamaica Gazette supplement proclamations, rules and regulations dated Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. The confirmation notification has been printed by the Jamaica Printing Services Limited and is available to the public to be used in conjunction with the Town and Country Planning, Kingston and St. Andrew, and the Pedro Keys Provisional Development Order 2017. A public notice regarding the confirmation was published in the Sunday Gleaner on June 4th, 2023 and June 11th, 2023, respectively. NEPA also dispatched copies of the confirmation notification to several of its key stakeholders. Question number 5. Can the Prime Minister indicate what building guidelines are the KSAMC and other planning authorities currently following to issue building permits? Answer. The building guidelines that the KSAMC and other building authorities are currently utilizing to issue building permits are the Building Act of 2018 and the National Building Code of Jamaica, comprising several international codes and the corresponding Jamaican application documents. In addition to building permits, the KSAMC and other planning authorities also issue planning decisions that are made using planning guidelines contained in the Town and Country Planning Act, as well as the various confirmed development orders and or the relevant provisional development orders, which are used as material considerations. Question number 6. Can the Prime Minister indicate what specific measures are included in the development order to ensure developments address the following? A, the effects of climate change, example, increased temperatures, more severe storms and hurricanes, extended droughts, rising sea levels, among other things. B, the measuring and mitigating of the rising pollution levels in our city. C, the provision of a minimum square footage of green spaces and recreational spaces based on the size of the development. And D, the provision of a minimum number of parking spaces relative to the number of habitable rooms. The answer. There are several specific and general measures that are included in the development order to ensure that the effects of climate change, the measuring and mitigating of the rising pollution levels in our city, the provision of a minimum square footage of green spaces and recreational spaces based on the size of the development, and the provision of a minimum number of parking spaces relative to the number of habitable rooms are addressed. The following policy guidelines and standards outlined in this presentation provides examples of some of these measures under the identified headings. Madam Speaker, it is quite a number of policies that I would have to read out. But, Madam Speaker, they are provided in written form to the member who asked the question. But if I were to just read a few of them for the record. So for climate change, issues related to climate change are embedded throughout the Town and Country Planning, Kingston and St. Andrew, Pedro Keys Provisional Development Order 2017. In the development order, there are specific sectoral and general development policies found under the heading Natural Hazard Vulnerability and Climate Change. And this is on page 293. Some of these, Madam Speaker, I'll just go through very quickly. Policy SP-NH3. The Planning Authority will ensure that multi-hazard vulnerability mapping is undertaken for the entire area, that is the area under the order, and is kept current so as to assist in the consideration of development proposals. Policy SP-NH4, the Planning Authority may, in consultation with the relevant authorities, limit or prohibit development in areas of high vulnerability as may be identified from time to time. This is based on the vulnerability map that is prepared. And policy SPNH6, the Planning Authority will seek to encourage the development of or improvements to the drainage infrastructure within the order area. Policy SPNH8, the Planning Authority will seek to ensure that development proposals adhere to applicable designs and building codes to mitigate the effects of multi-hazards. And Madam Speaker, as I've said, it's a number of policies that address the questions asked by the member. So, Madam Speaker, may these answer please the member and please the House.
Prime Minister, just some follow-up questions. If I go to page 3 of your answers, where you indicate that NEPA published in the daily newspaper on the 6th of August 2017, the 13th of August 2017, and the 20th of August 2017, notices which would have allowed persons to raise objections to provisions in the development order. Now, these would have been 6 years ago, notwithstanding the consultations that NEPA would have done, which you have outlined here. I find it unacceptable that the last publication inviting persons to raise objections would have been done 6 years ago.
Madam Speaker, the question raised by the member is a valid concern, but I would assure the member that in keeping with the law, NEPA would have published the notice, and the notice, Madam Speaker, would last for as long as the provisional order exists. So even though the notices were published in 2017, members could, right up until the point of confirmation, raise objections. Now, Madam Speaker, the member raised another question, which would have probably given the opportunity to provide more reassurance. And the question was whether or not there was consultation on the changes that occurred. And yes, Madam Speaker, there were consultations on the changes which occurred, which would, again, refresh the opportunity for objections to be raised. So, yes, Madam Speaker, I agree, the notices were published a long time ago, but it doesn't stop the general public or anyone with concern from continuing to raise their concern up until the point of the confirmation of the order. And further consultations were engaged, which would have refreshed the opportunity to raise objections or concerns.
PM, I must confess, there are a number of the stakeholder groups who have been following this issue very closely. And I will tell you, they were unaware that they had an opportunity to continue to raise objections. And in fact, many were awaiting an opportunity to have their input into the changes that were made to the development order, notwithstanding what is here. I have two other specific questions. One on page 8 of your answers relating to rainwater harvesting. And policy PUDWS2 says rainwater harvesting will be encouraged in residential and other developments to improve access to potable water systems. What does the word encourage means? Is it going to be a stipulation, or will the household or the developer have the option to determine whether they implement rainwater harvesting?
The member for the question is a very, very important question. Presently, it is not mandatory. And you would recall in my very extensive budget presentation last year, but you unfortunately, so you did not benefit from that presentation, which is why you asked the question. But you are traditionally at my presentation, so right. So, Madam Speaker, in that presentation, outlined the process of finalizing the policy on rainwater harvesting. So as soon as that is finalized, which will come to the House very shortly, then I hate to use the term mandatory, but there will be certainly a much more instrumental approach taken by both the planning authorities and the municipal authorities in ensuring that rainwater harvesting is incorporated in new buildings that are being proposed. Now, just to be clear, however, just to be clear, the municipal authorities have started to impose as a requirement of the building approvals that provisions are made for backup storage of water and that rainwater capture and harvesting is done, but it is not universal as yet.
Another question on the policy SPE2 on page 8. It says the planning authority will support building heights which make it unnecessary to install elevators or other lifting devices for goods and people or technology. This will significantly reduce or eliminate the use of non-renewable energy for their operation. Now, given the proliferation of buildings that are multi-story buildings, how does this square with this particular provision?
Prime Minister, turn on your mic, please.
Very, very good question from the member. Now, the development order identifies development areas and development corridors. And within certain corridors, the height restrictions have been ameliorated, for want of a better word, but meaning that some height restrictions have been removed and you can go higher. But in other areas, effectively what this policy is saying is that in areas where we have not identified as areas where the height restriction has been raised or totally removed, we would be supporting heights of buildings where elevators are not required. So remember now, the planning authority does not give building approval, but it gives the general direction in which the area should develop. So in areas that we have identified that you can go high in these areas, obviously, elevators and all the other requirements will be mandatory in those areas. But in other areas, the strategy is to have the heights such that you don't have to put in elevators. And that's the general direction. So that means there is an effective limit then on the heights of buildings in those areas.
Another very contentious issue is the lack of provision of green and recreational spaces. Now, based on your answer on page 10, you said, for example, a studio unit, a minimum of 15 square meters must be provided per unit. For one bedroom, 30 square meters, and for two or more bedroom unit, 60 square meters. I can tell you, Prime Minister, anecdotally, this is not being observed at all. You can look at multi-story buildings which provide no green or recreational space. And my concern as we have the proliferation, and I speak as an MP who probably has most of these developments, more than any other MP. I have more than you, Delroy. I have more than you, but we're not going to fight over it. But the point is, there's a lack of space for, particularly for children to play and for people to go outside and relax. And you can drive anywhere in the corporate area and you can see that these are not being observed. You see that in many of these buildings, there's no setback. They build right on the boundary next to a neighbor, which forces people, quite frankly, now to sell their properties because they have no privacy. They can't hang them clothes in their backyard. They can't go in their backyard and relax because people are looking down on them. So the issue of enforcement is critical. And frankly, the member from Northeast St. Andrew and I get many other complaints from our constituents about, and Eastern St. Andrew too, about these issues where in a residential area, without notice, people just say hoarding starting, and a 5-story building goes up beside them. Changes the character of a neighborhood. You can take in Northeast St. Andrew, Disbury Avenue is one. In Eastern St. Andrew, Charlemont is another, which you would know. Just the nature of those communities have changed in the last 5 years. And for those people who are original owners, who don't necessarily have anywhere to go, don't necessarily want to sell, they're stuck. They're literally stuck in a situation where their quality of life has diminished. And many of them, some opt to sell out because other developers are literally offering them multiples of the market price to sell their properties. But there has to be protection for those legitimate homeowners. And frankly, the authorities have fallen down in providing that protection and in enforcing these own regulations. They're not being enforced at all. And development is good. It provides jobs, it provides employment, but it has to be balanced against the needs of those householders who have been there for 30, 40 years and want to remain. Some people have a view, well, because you live in a particular area, development is natural and normal, and if you want to go somewhere else, go somewhere else. No, we can't take that attitude. Balance is needed. I believe both can coexist, but right now, the balance is tilted firmly in the hands of the developers. And the other concern that I have as well is the pace at which, as the opposition leader is intimating, the pace at which both water infrastructure is being put in to manage these developments, sewage, and also traffic. So you move from a case like in the Golden Triangle of a 1-acre lot, single-family home, to 30, 40 units, all with 2 or 3 cars. And what is the planning that we're doing to deal with traffic management, green space, etc.? So those are legitimate concerns that I believe need to be addressed as we welcome development, which we recognize to be good for the country.
Madam Speaker, the member did not ask a question, and I notice you gave him leave to, but I welcome the presentation of the member because it is, Madam Speaker, to be fair, it is a solid presentation and not one from which I defer. It is a concern that I too have. Madam Speaker, the truth of the matter is that the energy for the redevelopment of Kingston and St. Andrew has outpaced the ability of the authorities to regulate it. That is the case, and it is not a situation that has occurred since 2016. It has been the case from at least 10 years before that. What we have been doing since, Madam Speaker, to start where the member from Southeast St. Andrew left off, is to address the infrastructure need to deal with the capacity issues. So the member mentioned, for example, well, I believe it was the leader of the opposition who mentioned Wellington Drive or some other roads, Dillsbury or so. And what we have done is to do a mapping of the entire area to see where development is going and where traffic is going. Much of the changes that we're seeing, Madam Speaker, it's as a result of changes in traffic flow, increased use of areas, and just the natural movement of human activity over time. Like it or not, this will occur and it will drive development. So we are trying to regulate that as best as possible and put in place the infrastructure to give capacity. So on these roads that have been mentioned, there is a plan for sewage, and several of these roads are under the CAP program, which is the Capital Expenditure Program, which will see the laying of sewage, improvement in the water main, telecommunications, and other infrastructure in addition to the rehabilitation, widening of those roads. So that is being planned out. So I give the assurance that the government has taken a forward approach in planning for the expansion along the corridors, which have been, by the order, designated for development. Secondly, Madam Speaker, the issue of enforcement. I will be the first to tell you that the capacity of NEPA, the municipal authority, and all the other entities that have a regulatory function, it is not up to the task that they are confronted with. Last year, Madam Speaker, we took a decision to increase the regulatory capacity of the municipal authority, and they are now in the process of increasing the number of officers, inspection officers that they have. And I'm hoping that by the time I present in April, I'll be able to announce what that number is. But they have started. NEPA has acknowledged that they too have a shortage, and they are increasing the number of officers that they have. This is not to say, Madam Speaker, that they don't do site visits and inspections. They do, but we will be the first to say it is not sufficient in terms of what is necessary for the proper enforcement of the rules. Madam Speaker, in terms of green spaces, the new order takes an enlightened approach to development. Now, Madam Speaker, the historical nature of the land subdivision in Kingston is that we have historically small lots, an acre, half acre, quarter acre. That has been the history. And so we have land that is highly disaggregated. So it's very difficult to have the kind of well-planned mass development that would be needed without having to confront individual owners. And so what you find happening, Madam Speaker, is that a developer may be successful on a road in acquiring one piece of property, and that's a very small development of which they will have to reserve some amount of land for sewage, some for parking, some for green space. And what that does, Madam Speaker, is the developers obviously are trying to make the venture profitable. So they develop the area in a very congested way. And it takes a very long time for the development to reach to the point where an entire road could be considered to be, I hate to use the term, but the term in development is regentrified. If we use it without context, it could be misinterpreted. But the term for the redevelopment of an entire area, it's called regentrification. For that to happen, Madam Speaker, you would need to be able to acquire masses of properties over a period of time, and then that would give you now the ability to properly plan at an economic scale sewage, recreational areas, parking, and so forth. But because of just the nature of how our land has been subdivided, it defeats this regentrification process. So we have a policy that we are developing, Madam Speaker, to support that. And we intend to have that policy first implemented in the Swallowfield area. In a large budget presentation, it's not at the point where it is, but you will obviously be consulted when it is at that point. But, Madam Speaker, so this new development order specifies what each unit is required, as read out by the member from Southeast. So a unit that is 15 square meters or 161 square feet, right? But a studio unit, rather, must have 15 square meters of green space, or 161 square feet of green space allocated to it. Now, Madam Speaker, persons who are in the development field will tell you that if you were to go to any city, you would not necessarily see townhouses or studios or apartments all having their individual reservation. What happens is that they are all built up, and then there is a big park reserve, so you can walk from your house to the park. We don't necessarily have that in Jamaica, but again, because of the historical subdivision of the land, developers don't have that mass of land to make those provisions. But, Madam Speaker, what will happen now, Madam Speaker, is that with the increased capacity to inspect and enforce, where developers are given approval, these requirements, Madam Speaker, will be strongly enforced. The real issue is an enforcement one, and the capacity of NEPA and the municipal authority to enforce. So, Madam Speaker, my answer to the member through his statements and his suggested question is that the government is increasing its capacity to enforce on these matters.
Thank you. Motions that may be made at the commencement of public business requiring notice, motions relating to the sitting of the House, motions for leave to introduce bills, presentation of bills without leave of the House, first obtained, public business.
Madam Speaker, on the matter of public business, the Deputy House Leader, who moved the motion earlier with regards to sessional committees headed by the former Deputy Speaker and now Speaker, will move for the approval of the motions. May it please you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I now move for the suspension of the standing orders to enable me to take the motion, notice of which I gave earlier.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, at this point, I will just ask that the motion be approved.
Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. House Leader?
Madam Speaker, it is not intended to do any further business for the day. But, Madam Speaker, in moving the motion for adjournment, I'd like to just recall that the sectoral debate continues tomorrow, and the Speaker, the constituency debate, continues tomorrow. And the Speaker at that time will be the member for Southeast St. Catherine, Mr. Robert Miller. Madam Speaker, we also, I think, inadvertently omitted to welcome back our member from the great constituency, one removed, of Manchester Northeast, Mr. Audley Shaw, who was ill, and he's back in the House, and we want to wish him well as he continues to carry out his duties as an effective member of Parliament. Madam Speaker, the NIA, I understand, had been doing a series of study on the oversight functions of Parliament, and as a result of which a report is being provided, and I think there is a session at Mind tomorrow starting at 10 o'clock, to which we have been asked as members to avail ourselves the possibility of coming to hear what the report of the team that did the analysis would be, and no doubt to offer our own insight into the way forward. So I offer that as an activity tomorrow, that members who are able to, please do go and get a sense of what has been said. Because, you know, a lot of time we listen to ourselves a bit, but we need some time to listen to what others say about our own oversight activities here in the Parliament. May it please you, Madam Speaker. In the context, therefore, I beg to... Yes. I'm being advised that as a continuation of the activities, the supplementary, yes, that the PAAC will meet at what, 11? 10 a.m. and thereafter the 2 o'clock meeting of the House, the supplementary estimates will be taken. Madam Speaker, I beg to move, therefore, that this House be adjourned until tomorrow at 2 p.m. at the George William Gordon House.
The question is that the House do now adjourn for Wednesday, October 4, 2023 at 2 p.m. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. This honorable House now stands adjourned.